For centuries, deep within the humid, emerald labyrinth of the Amazon rainforest, there existed a ghost. Not a spirit of the dead, but a substance that defied the laws of nature. If you were an explorer in the 1700s, hacking through the dense undergrowth of the basin, you might have seen an indigenous hevea worker make a surgical strike into the bark of a towering tree. What followed wasn't sap, and it wasn't water. It was a thick, milky white blood that dripped rhythmically into a clay pot. The locals called it caoutchouc, literally, the wood that weeps. To the indigenous peoples of the Americas, this substance was divine. It was used to create waterproof cloaks and the heavy, solid balls used in ritual games that had been played for 1,000 years. But to the Western world, this weeping wood was a frustrating, paradoxical nightmare. It was a material that promised to change everything, but for nearly a century, it did nothing but fail. Welcome back to Brew Lore. Today, we begin the story of the most liquid asset in history, rubber. This isn't just a story of tires and elastic bands. It is a chronicle of bio-piracy, corporate greed, and a harvest so crimson it would eventually stain the conscience of the world. Our story begins in 1735. Charles-Marie de la Condamine, a French scientist and explorer, became the first European to send samples of rubber back to the Academy of Sciences in Paris. He described a material that could be molded into any shape, was completely waterproof, and most miraculously, could rub out lead pencil marks from paper. This humble utility gave the substance its English name, rubber. But there was a catch, a massive, sticky, catastrophic catch. In its natural state, rubber was a temperamental beast. In the heat of a European summer, a pair of rubber boots would turn into a gooey, foul-smelling puddle on the floor. In the dead of winter, those same boots would become as brittle as glass, shattering the moment the wearer took a step. It was a miracle material that didn't work. For decades, rubber was a novelty, a curiosity for the elite, and a graveyard for investors. The world wanted the bleed of the tree, but they couldn't control its heart. The early 19th century saw a rubber fever that rivaled the gold rushes. In New England, factories sprang up overnight, churning out rubber-coated life preservers, hats, and coats. People were mesmerized. It was the first plastic age. But the fever broke almost as quickly as it began. One particularly hot summer in the 1830s, thousands of rubber products across America literally melted simultaneously. The stench of decomposing, uncured rubber filled the streets. Factories went bankrupt. The dream of the weeping tree seemed to be over. Yet, deep in the Amazon, the trees were still weeping. And in a small, cramped workshop in Massachusetts, a man named Charles Goodyear was about to become so obsessed with this white blood that he would lose his fortune, his health, and nearly his mind to tame it. The bleeding tree was no longer just a botanical curiosity. It was becoming a siren song for the industrial age. The world was about to move faster, fly higher, and communicate across oceans, and every single bit of that progress would require the milk of the hevea tree. But as the demand for this black gold began to skyrocket, the cost would no longer be measured in dollars or pounds. It would be measured in lives. As we close this first chapter, the Amazon stands as the world's only source of high-quality rubber. It was a monopoly protected by thousands of miles of impenetrable jungle. But the industrial world doesn't handle monopolies well. The weeping wood was about to be dragged out of the shadows of the rainforest and into the brutal light of the global empire. This is where the story shifts from a botanical curiosity to an industrial obsession. For Brew Lore, we want to capture the frantic energy of the 19th century and the mad scientist vibe of Charles Goodyear. If rubber was the white blood of the Amazon, then Charles Goodyear was the man who performed the ultimate alchemy. But he didn't do it in a high-tech lab. He did it in a state of near starvation, surrounded by debt collectors and the smell of sulfur. By the mid-1830s, rubber was a joke. It was the melt-in-your-hands material that had bankrupted almost everyone who touched it. But Goodyear was a man possessed. He believed that if he could just find the right curing agent, he could turn this fickle sap into a material as durable as iron. He experimented with everything: salt, pepper, sugar, even soup. His family lived in poverty, and he often sold his children's schoolbooks just to buy more rubber samples. People in his town said, "If you see a man with an India rubber coat, rubber shoes, and a rubber purse and not a cent in it, that is Charles Goodyear." Then came the accident that changed the world. In 1839, while arguing with a group of skeptics in a general store, Goodyear accidentally dropped a piece of rubber mixed with sulfur onto a hot stove. He expected it to melt into a puddle. Instead, it charred like a piece of leather. It remained flexible but tough. He had cracked the code. He called it Vulcanization, named after Vulcan, the Roman god of fire. Suddenly, the weeping wood was no longer a novelty. It was the most important substance on Earth. Within years, vulcanized rubber was everywhere. It wasn't just for boots anymore. It was the gaskets in the steam engines that powered the Industrial Revolution. It was the insulation for the telegraph wires that allowed London to speak to New York in seconds. It was the hoses for fire engines and the valves in the pumps that kept coal mines from flooding. But then came the spark that turned the rubber fever into an all-out wildfire: the pneumatic tire. In 1888, a Scottish veterinarian named John Boyd Dunlop was watching his young son struggle to ride a tricycle across a bumpy cobblestone street. To make the ride smoother, he wrapped the wheels in thin rubber sheets and filled them with air. He had unknowingly unlocked the final gate of the modern age. Within a decade, the bicycle craze had swept the globe. Millions of people who had never traveled further than 10 miles from their birthplace were suddenly mobile. And right behind the bicycle came the horseless carriage, the automobile. Every car needed 4 tires. Every tire needed pounds of pure, high-quality rubber. The demand didn't just grow, it exploded. Between 1890 and 1910, the price of rubber skyrocketed. In the city of Manaus, deep in the heart of the Brazilian Amazon, the rubber barons became the wealthiest men on the planet. They built a grand opera house in the middle of the jungle, importing Italian marble and French chandeliers. They reportedly sent their laundry to Paris to be washed because they didn't trust the local river water. But there was a dark mathematical reality beneath this opulence. The rubber trees in the Amazon didn't grow in neat rows. They were scattered, often hundreds of yards apart, hidden in the dense canopy. To harvest the sap, you couldn't just build a factory. You needed an army of workers to trek miles through the jungle every single day to tap the trees. As the world's appetite for tires and wires became insatiable, the rubber barons realized that voluntary labor wouldn't be enough. To keep the black gold flowing and the profits climbing, they would need something more efficient than wages. They would need a system of absolute control. The golden age of rubber was about to collide with the darkest impulses of human greed. Because while the wealthy in London and New York were enjoying the smooth ride of their new pneumatic tires, a different kind of harvest was beginning in the Congo and the Putumayo, a harvest that would be written in blood. While the rubber barons of the Amazon were building opera houses, a man thousands of miles away was building a private hell. His name was King Leopold II of Belgium, but he didn't act in the name of his country. He acted in the name of a shell company. He called his private colony the Congo Free State, a name that would become one of the most bitter ironies in human history. Leopold hadn't found gold or diamonds in the Congo. He had found something far more valuable for the 1890s: Landolphia vines. Unlike the hevea trees of the Amazon, these were wild rubber vines that climbed hundreds of feet into the forest canopy. They were harder to harvest, but Leopold had a solution that didn't involve expensive machinery or fair wages. He had a system of terror. The world's hunger for bicycle and car tires was now so ravenous that the white gold of the Congo became the fuel for a genocide. Leopold's private army, the force publique, would descend on a village and take the women and children hostage. To win their families' freedom, the men were forced into the jungle to meet impossible quotas of wild rubber. They had to climb the vines, often hundreds of feet in the air, and smear the liquid latex over their own bodies to let it dry before peeling it off. A process that took their hair and skin with it. But the vines were drying up. As the men had to trek further and further into the heart of the jungle to find more rubber, they began to fail their quotas. And Leopold's officers had a rule for failure. Every bullet fired by a soldier had to be accounted for. To prove they weren't wasting ammunition on hunting animals or saving the bullets for a mutiny, the soldiers were required to provide a human hand for every bullet spent. This led to the most haunting image of the rubber trade: baskets filled with severed hands, brought to colonial outposts as a grim form of currency. It wasn't about the bullets, it was about the fear. The red rubber system turned the Congo into a giant labor camp. Historians estimate that during Leopold's reign, the population of the Congo was slashed by half. Nearly 10 million people perished to satisfy the global demand for rubber. Back in Europe and America, the public remained blissfully unaware. They saw the civilizing mission Leopold claimed to be leading. They enjoyed the luxury of rubber-soled shoes and the smooth ride of pneumatic tires, never knowing that those tires were, quite literally, inflated with the breath of the dying. But secrets in the jungle have a way of bleeding out. In the early 1900s, a few brave souls, a shipping clerk named Edmund Morel, a diplomat named Roger Casement, and missionaries with cameras, began to smuggle out the truth. They captured photographs of grieving fathers staring at the severed hands of their children. They published accounts of the rubber tax that horrified the world. This was the first international human rights movement of the modern era. The Congo Reform Association turned the tide of public opinion, eventually forcing Leopold to hand over his private playground to the Belgian government. But the damage was done. The heart of darkness wasn't just a literary metaphor. It was a corporate strategy. And while the Congo was being bled dry, the British Empire was watching. They realized that relying on wild vines and blood rubber was unstable. If they wanted to rule the 20th century, they couldn't just harvest rubber. They had to steal the secrets of the tree itself. The era of the wild harvest was ending. The era of the great Bio-Piracy was about to begin. While King Leopold was turning the Congo into a graveyard, the British Empire was facing a different kind of crisis. A supply chain problem. The world was now running on rubber, but the British were entirely dependent on the Amazonian rubber barons and their wild, scattered trees. For an empire built on control, this was unacceptable. They didn't just want to buy rubber, they wanted to own the tree. The Brazilian government knew exactly what they had. They guarded the Hevea brasiliensis like a national treasure. Exporting the seeds was a crime punishable by death. They had a monopoly that seemed unbreakable, until a man named Henry Wickham stepped into the rainforest. Wickham was a failed planter with a desperate need for cash and a very specific set of instructions from the director of Kew Gardens in London. He was tasked with the 19th century's most audacious act of industrial espionage. He was going to kidnap 70,000 seeds. In 1876, Wickham spent weeks in the deep Amazon, hiring indigenous workers to gather the heavy, oily seeds of the rubber tree. But the clock was his greatest enemy. Rubber seeds are notoriously fragile. They lose their ability to germinate within days of being picked. If he didn't get them to London immediately, he was just carrying 70,000 pieces of useless wood. Fortune favored the bold and the deceptive. A British steamship, the SS Amazonas, had been abandoned by its captains in the port of Manaus. Wickham chartered the ship using credit he didn't have and loaded his cargo. When he reached the Brazilian customs house at the mouth of the river, he didn't declare the future of the global economy. Instead, he told the officials he was carrying exceedingly delicate botanical specimens for Her Majesty's own gardens. The officials, perhaps swayed by Wickham's confidence or perhaps a few well-placed bribes, let the ship pass. Wickham raced across the Atlantic. When he arrived in London, a special train was waiting to rush the seeds to Kew Gardens. Within weeks, the greenhouses of London were filled with thousands of tiny green sprouts. These were the children of the Amazon, but they were now property of the Crown. The British took these seedlings and shipped them to their colonies in Malaya and Ceylon, modern-day Sri Lanka. Unlike the wild, scattered trees of the Amazon, the British planted them in neat, orderly rows. They created the plantation system. The impact was a slow-motion car crash for Brazil. In 1910, the Amazon produced 99% of the world's rubber. By 1920, that number had plummeted to almost nothing. The rubber barons of Manaus watched as their opera houses crumbled and their fortunes vanished. The center of the rubber world had moved from the Amazon to Southeast Asia in the blink of an eye. Henry Wickham was knighted for his service to the empire. In Brazil, however, he is still remembered as the executioner of Amazonas, the man who stole the soul of a nation. But the British monopoly would face its own reckoning. As the world marched toward two global conflicts, the bleed of the tree would become the ultimate strategic resource. The nation that controlled the rubber controlled the war. And as the trees in Asia were threatened by a new rising power, the world would be forced to find a way to replace nature itself. By the 1930s, the world was literally rolling on British and Dutch rubber from Southeast Asia. But as the drums of war began to beat across Europe and the Pacific, the greatest military powers on Earth realized they had a terrifying Achilles heel. Every tank, every fighter plane, and every gas mask required rubber. If the supply from the East were cut off, the machinery of modern war would grind to a screeching halt in weeks. The rubber gap was the secret nightmare of the Allied and Axis powers alike. When Japan invaded Malaya in 1942, the nightmare became a reality. Overnight, the United States lost 90% of its rubber supply. It was the greatest strategic crisis of World War II. The government launched rubber drives, asking citizens to donate old tires, garden hoses, and even rubber raincoats. But you can't win a global war on scrap. The solution didn't come from the jungle. It came from the laboratory. In a frantic multi-billion-dollar race that rivaled the Manhattan Project, scientists scrambled to perfect synthetic rubber. They weren't looking for a tree's blood anymore. They were looking to rearrange the molecules of petroleum. By the end of the war, the US was producing nearly 1 million tons of synthetic rubber a year. The weeping tree had finally been replaced by the oil well, but the ghost of the Hevea tree didn't vanish. Today, look at your car. Your tires are a complex blend of synthetic and natural rubber. Why? Because even after a century of chemical engineering, we still cannot fully replicate the heat resistance and durability of the natural bleed from the Amazonian tree. Every time a giant cargo plane lands or a Formula One car takes a corner, it is relying on a substance that was once a divine secret of the rainforest. The legacy of the rubber trade is written in the geography of our world. It built the cities of the Amazon and then abandoned them. It fueled the rise of the British Empire in Asia, and it left a scar on the Congo that has never truly healed. We live in a world made of rubber, yet we rarely think about the weeping wood or the cost of its harvest. From the ritual ball games of the Aztecs to the high-tech tires of today, the story of rubber is the story of humanity's relentless drive to bend nature to its will, no matter the price. This has been the story of the deadly glow. Next time you see a tire or pull on a pair of boots, remember the wood that weeps, the black gold of the jungle, and the blood that was shed to keep the modern world moving. I'm your host for Brew Lore. Until next time, keep digging into the dark roots of the things we take for granted. If you haven't subscribed yet, try to do so, and we will see you in the next one. Thanks you.